the TEFL Commute, Season 4, Episode 3, in which we talk about one of the only vowel sounds with a name in English. Yes, the upside down E, or the schwa. Let's get started.
Hey, Lindsay.
Hey, Sean. How's it going?
Oh, I should have gone, Lindsay, or something like that.
Sean.
Yeah, this will be a great episode for me, because I make that sound all the time for any episode anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to the podcast, folks. This is the TEFL Commute podcast in which we talk about teaching, English language teaching. And the topic seems to come up more and more, even though when we first started, we said it might come up. How are you, Lindsay?
I'm fine. You kind of botched that introduction.
No, it's kind of like I'm a bit tired of the fact we try and claim it's not about teaching, but it is about teaching, and it won't come up and it won't come up. Let's just cut to the chase. It's about teaching.
It's about teaching. Well, today is about teaching, but it's also about language. And I think today we're focusing on a much-loved aspect of English. Right, Sean?
You might be right, yeah.
Might be right. If the number of YouTube videos that are abound about this topic of English pronunciation, which is the schwa. The schwa.
We need some fanfare music there. We should do it again. Like, the you can't say it now. The schwa.
Okay.
Well, let's I can't get the out of my head now. Let's bring in someone else to talk about the schwa.
Yeah, because I actually wanted to speak to this person about it because I missed her talk at TEFL, which went down very well apparently, and was also the subject, I think, of a webinar. We'll ask her about it when she comes on. It's Sinead Lapland, who did a talk called "The Cult of the Schwa." Oh, I'm wondering if there should be a schwa in her last name. Let's ask her. Sinead, are you there?
How you doing, boys? I'm here. I am indeed. Schwa, my last name. Laffin. There is indeed.
Okay. All right. Sinead Laffin. So schwa on the last one. And we're here to talk about, partly about your talk, but also just chat about the schwa, about what is the obsession with the schwa. So let's just, in case there is one of our listeners who is just starting teaching and hasn't come across this yet, for whatever reason, Sinead, can you just tell everybody what the schwa is?
Absolutely. So the schwa, in its sort of technical definition, is referred to as a mid-central vowel, produced with the articulators, so the tongue, the teeth, the lips, the jaw, etc., in a neutral or resting position.
Okay.
How's that? Is it technical enough for you?
That sounds very technical. Yeah.
Sounds technical. So let's each in turn make the schwa sound then, right? So I'll go first. So is that it? Right?
So what might help you is Kelly refers to it as the Friday afternoon sound.
No.
Isn't it just the teenage boy sound?
Grunting at you from behind his laptop.
Yeah.
I got one of those at home.
Yeah, or that kind of another colleague of mine used to refer to it as that sound you make, the first sound you make in the morning in your pajamas, hair everywhere.
Isn't that like a longer one though, like
yeah, maybe not that much. Yeah.
I think the interesting thing about schwa is the more you try to focus on it, the more like it's going to escape, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just disappears because you are focusing so hard on saying something.
Well, it's like the word. Okay, a word with a schwa at the end. Let's take America, right? But if you start like enunciating it so it's America, then schwa is gone, right? Because if you stress the sound,
which happens then in classrooms. Every time it comes up for discussion in classrooms.
Yeah.
People end up over-enunciating it. Teachers end up over-enunciating it, and so students kind of lose it and don't understand what it is. I've came across three beautiful quotations, which I'll read to you about it, which kind of contrast with this idea of needing a fanfare to introduce it. Is all from Japanese people. So I don't know, let's take that as our kind of zen for the day. The first one is, schwa is a modest sound who steps aside to let others shine.
Oh, nice. I like that, yeah.
The second is, the schwa just is, serene and undemanding, the vibration of air through the body to the outside world, the essence of speech itself.
So like these are schwa haiku.
Yeah. I was going to say, wasn't it Poetry Day this week or something? So then we've got these are the entries that.
No, give me more. What's some more? The third.
I know, this is like super zen. Okay, if you're feeling yourself, if you want to sit in a lotus position for the last one, feel free.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm
there. You're there. Yeah. The schwa is the most elusive, selfless, and yielding vowel of all. Teaching schwa is almost like teaching nothingness.
That needs like angels either side of it. I think it could happily fit into the Facebook philosophy. I'm interested. It's interesting, those two quotes though. They're the first two especially, because they make the schwa sound so easy. But actually, for students, the schwa is really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, incredibly difficult, and I think it's because of that. I think when I think about the psychology of what's happening in a classroom, I think that students come into a classroom and they're making an effort, and the schwa is the opposite of effort, and especially when you set it up in a classroom and say, okay, today we're going to do something that's really important for speaking English and for understanding English, and you get everybody kind of focused and they're all ready to make an effort, yet the schwa is the exact opposite of that.
So what you're saying then is we shouldn't explicitly teach it.
I think that we should explicitly teach it. I'm a huge advocate of raising awareness to it, but I think that the way that it's approached is really important, and the way that it's kind of weaved into your teaching on a regular basis, that it's just part of for me, it's part of everything I teach. It turns up on my board all the time. I have students sort of hunting it out and finding it in texts all the time. And so it's part of everything that we do in the classroom, but it's not this separate thing. I think when it becomes separate, that's where it becomes over pronounced and then sort of gets lost. You can't kind of grasp it. You can't get a hold of it.
When you say separate, what do you mean? Because I mean, that's one of the problems with pronunciation. It's not often integrated itself into a lesson. So when you say it's just there in the lesson, it must be focused upon at some point, and therefore it becomes a separate phase of the lesson, doesn't it?
It becomes an isolated, I suppose, section of the class. But for me, I want it very much integrated into the course, and that when I present a piece of language, I'm presenting the lexical implications of that language, the grammatical implications of the language, and the phonological implications of that language. And that the pronunciation is often something that's left to the side, it's not dealt with. And then when teachers do start dealing with it, it's like, okay, it's Monday, today we're going to do the schwa. And so it becomes this kind of isolated thing.
Oh, I see what you mean. Is that because, as Lindsay said, you're a bit obsessed with the schwa? I mean, your talk was called The Cult of the Schwa.
Yeah.
And was that what you were talking about, Sinead, about how to integrate this kind of thing into pronunciation teaching, or was there more to it than that? The Cult of the Schwa. What else?
Yeah, it was very much about that approach to teaching pronunciation, and I took the schwa as a starting point. But obviously, you can't separate the schwa from connected speech and from other features of pronunciation. So it's a nice sort of segue into that,
Yeah, because the schwa is one of those sounds that is for a syllable, but also can replace is for words or is often features in the weak form of like grammatical words like had and them, right? I mean, so the more you string those together, the more you'll start or putting those into unstressed into sentences. That's when the schwa starts appearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the smallest sound in the English language. It's the most common sound in the English language. I mean, if you look at all those common words, like we've got our articles, we've got our contractions, our auxiliary verbs, our prepositions, and now you start to see how how common it is and how regularly it appears and how much it needs to be dealt with.
Right. Actually, I was hoping that the cult of the schwa was going to be like revealing a whole bunch of people who would wear hoods and gowls and capes and walk around going.
I have ambitions, Lindsay. I'm not done yet. You
know? Maybe that was the start of it. In a couple of years, we'll be going to conferences and they will be there in the corner with their hoods up, going. But you have taken your love of the schwa further than most people, though, I would say.
Oh, you're going there, right, Sean? I know
it just seems to be an appropriate moment to kind of mention it.
Yeah. Well, because, Sinead, we saw a picture of you that you have a tattoo of a schwa on your arm. Is that right?
This is indeed true, yes. And I meet people and they see it and they think... Generally, when I meet people at conferences who recognize what it is, they just presume that it's a Sharpie on schwa. But no, it is in fact a tattoo on the inside of my left wrist.
See, inside of the left wrist. Now, I didn't know this before, so I've just found out. And Sean, I don't think, knows the story behind it either. But we're desperate to know.
Okay.
But before we ask you, I want to guess why you have a schwa. Why would somebody have a schwa tattooed on their wrist?
Okay, yeah, you want to guess? I'm good
right.
with that. Yeah.
Sean, wait. Hey, I have a suggestion. Why don't we do this? Sean and I will take turns. We'll take turns guessing, and you tell us hot or cold.
Okay, I'm good with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Right.
I think it's a result of a lost bet with a mispronunciation in a training session.
So cold. Arctic.
Okay.
Cold. Okay, I'm going to guess that like you had a boyfriend from a country with like a foreign name that had lots of schwas, like whatever. I don't know, Johnny, like something like that, or like there's some kind of Irish Johnny kind of guy. No, not
Tundra-esque, sir. Tundra-esque. Cold as it gets.
Okay, Sean.
I think Sinead struggled to produce the sound, so she puts it there to remind herself to say it when she's speaking properly.
That's a charmingly insulting guess.
I know.
As a speaker of Hiberno English, heavily influenced obviously by the Irish language,
I
also features
She never fails to rise. There you go.
Proficient in the schwa, sir.
He's cold on that as well.
Very cold.
Cold, but I made her temperature.
Okay. Could it possibly be to cover up another tattoo?
Oh, a tattoo
thing, or a name or something like that, and you just thought, I got to get rid of this, but it was too expensive, so you tattooed a schwa over it.
No, but I'm kind of trying now. I'm looking at it, thinking what could possibly fit under it. I mean, it's a pretty minimal tattoo,
like a snake. I don't know, a snake, a little English dragon, Celtic dragon, or something like that. A little thing like a lizard. I don't know.
Is it the first? Is it the first in a series of tattoos? You're going to get one every year until you've got the whole of the chart on your body.
You see, when I met Adrian Underhill and he saw the tattoo, he suggested the same thing. To which I said to him, "You, above all people, should know that that's the only one you need."
Okay.
So again,
I'm gonna give up. We're all too cold. What? The story better be better than some of our guesses.
The story, right? It kind of has a number of parts. This thing, I thought about it for about. I thought about the tattoo for a long time because I've always wanted to get a tattoo. But I think that I didn't want to have one of those kind of generic tattoos. You know, I think if you're going to scar yourself for life, I think it should be something
like a Chinese lettering that probably means, bathroom down the right.
Exactly. I didn't want to be one of those fake hipster chicks, Okay. And I spent a month in India working with some trainees. And I had these students,
English teaching trainees, right?
English teaching, yeah, training teachers, and I had a bunch of students who were in the classes for practice lessons, and I had to teach a demonstration lesson the first day I arrived. And I went into this classroom, and these students were sort of 18 to 19. I was told that they were B1 level. When I arrived in the class, they couldn't understand, or at least they seemed not to understand a word I said. And so I very quickly had to recalibrate, throw the lesson out the door and start again. And so I went to a kind of a stock lesson that I have in the back of my brain, which is using weak forms of auxiliary verbs to produce questions on can you, and have you. Yeah. And so I did this lesson, and by the end of the class, they were all producing wonderful questions and running around the room in a mingle going, can you speak French? Do you like this? Have you got any brothers? Blah, 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 blah. And they were all really engaged and really motivated and seemed to really get such a kick out of this weird thing I think they really had never encountered before.
Okay.
And I felt so proud of myself.
I'm still wondering how we're going to get to the schwa.
I'm wondering where the part where you go to the Indian tattoo parlor. So I'm waiting.
Oh, I get it. She celebrated the success of the lesson so hard that.
You're talking to
the next day.
You're talking to an Irish woman. Irish people have the skill of making a long story short and a short story long. So we're getting there, gents. We're getting there.
Okay.
But basically, I came out of this process feeling like incredibly proud of myself. But then I also sort of walked away thinking about the context that I was in. And about 6 months later, I realized that maybe the context that I was in, this teaching this weak form wasn't the most useful thing for these learners, because the schwa isn't massively prevalent in Indian English.
So it was a punishment then?
It's kind of a reminder to me to check yourself before you wreck yourself, I guess, kind of consider the context that you're in. It's also a bit of an homage to a 7-year kind of apprenticeship with my old boss, the guy that I worked with for 7 years called Dave Young, who was a bit of a phonology junkie. And also the third part of this thing is to walk into a classroom and to show students that you have scarred yourself for them and their education. It's really quite easy to get them to produce sound. Just barely move your arm and it becomes this behaviourist thing. It also saves me an incredible amount of time because I no longer have to write 16 of them on my board on a daily basis. So
it's kind of taking teaching with minimal resources to the extreme, isn't it? I know I'm going to go to a context that hasn't got it. So I'm going to put it on my body and I'll always have it with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Great stories. I like it. I like check yourself before you wreck yourself. So I'm going to put a straw on my arm, and next time I decide, do I have another gin tonic or should I stop now? I'll just check the straw.
I am curious. Obviously, language teachers would probably recognise it. But Lindsay, kind of when we were guessing, we were talking about the idea of the Chinese symbol, and people must always go to those tattoos. What does it mean? Do you end up having to explain it? Does it become
the non-English teaching people? Do you explain it?
It's like this burden of, what is this? Why do I? Oh no, not again! Kind of. I've got to explain it again.
Yeah. But it's it's a small burden. It's a small burden. Yeah, I mean, my nieces and nephews who were kind of 2 and 3 and 4, kind of the first time they saw it, they're all climbing all over me, going, "Auntie Nate, what is this?" But now they all know what it is. They don't really know what it is, but they see it and they make the noise, and
I think we should just go away to listen to some Facebook philosophy. But when we come back, I want to know, Sinead, is it the right way round?
Strong teachers don't teach content. Google has content. String teaching connects learning in ways that inspire kids to learn more and strive for greatness. Eric Jensen.
So, Sinead, is it the right way around?
Yes, it is. Well, it is if I'm looking at it. So,
But if you look at it in the mirror, or if you take a photo of it and show it, is it the wrong way around? Is that?
If I put my wrist up and face it out to a classroom, it's the correct way for them looking at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it would be upside down, wouldn't it? I mean, the way what I was thinking was it's got to be. I mean, it's an upside down E, isn't it? Anyway, really, but for one way it will be an upside down E, and another way it would be correct, wasn't it? Depending.
Yeah, I mean, I have to have my wrist. I have to have my hand up in the air. You know what I mean? But that was the way I wanted it for a classroom. Down is kind of nonsense, so it's up.
Hey, Incidentally, we've been talking about teaching and scarring ourselves with the schwa. Anybody have interesting stuff about the schwa? First question. I know that the schwa is like very popular in English. I know it exists, I think, in German and in Dutch, doesn't it? Germans and Dutch people have the schwa. I don't think Spanish does, actually, or very not much. And French, not really either. Italian, no. Anyone know what languages do or don't have the schwa?
Well, a little bit of my reading seems to suggest that Catalan does. Although I don't know how good your Catalan is, Lindsay.
A little bit.
Yeah. Seem to suggest Catalan. Malay I came across, Indonesian, Bulgarian. I mean, Irish has it. I've recently started learning Hungarian. Unfortunately for me, there are no schwas in Hungarian. But it's a lot more widespread than you might kind of think, you know?
Yeah. Do you think Russian has it? Does Russian have a schwa?
I don't think so. I wouldn't have thought so.
I would have thought so. I would have said yes.
Hang on, I'll Google it while we talk.
Google it while we'll talk.
You do some fun facts, and I'll do the Google.
Fun facts. Well, some other things that I found out about the schwa was that it was invented for German. The upside down E was used as a symbol, according to my research, by Johann Schmeller in his 1821 Grammar of Bavarian German. He was describing the proprieties of a particular dialect and wanted to represent actual pronunciation of how people really talked. So there was that. Before people started calling it the schwa in English, which apparently comes from Hebrew, schwa, which is a different sound. But then 19th century German philologists started using the German spelling schwa. Other interesting facts. I like this one here. Sinead and I were talking about this before. English has a tendency to delete a syllable with a schwa. But then we got into an argument, didn't we, Sinead, whether or not they're just pronouncing it wrong. So like different becomes different.
Different.
Different. It could be a schwa, but you could delete it there, right? Different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chocolate.
You sound like one of the. We were talking about YouTube videos earlier on. You sound like one of the YouTube videos. There's a lot of exercises.
I haven't rehearsed it. So.
Yeah, but it's almost like they do these YouTube clips where they go, okay, listen and tell me where the schwa is, and there is no schwa in the word, and you just think, and they say there is one. I'll find a clip and see if we'll put it in.
That one is because I did delete the schwa, but there's another time that they say that English sometimes sticks in an extra schwa where it's not necessary. And there's one that I really love, which is crazy. So we have crazy. But if you put the schwa in the beginning, you have crazy. You got another one there, Sinead? One that you...
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got an Irish one. So Irish people are commonly commented upon / mocked for saying film.
Instead of film.
Instead of film, yeah. And I mean, they say like the idea of sticking in that schwa is to break up kind of difficult to say consonant clusters. And as I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to see if there's an LM consonant cluster in Irish, and I'm going to say there isn't because I can't think of one. And that would be my thinking as to why the schwa has appeared in Hiberno English. Because as Irish speakers, we're not used to that sound coming together.
Okay.
On masterrussian.net, they say that there is a toneless pronunciation of the A and the O sounds, but they wouldn't term it as a schwa. That's only one site I've looked at.
I found another blog which was really great that I ended up going down this rabbit hole for ages. It was a blog called Dialect Blog, and this guy has lots of different interesting articles. So again, he has an article on film.
Film.
Yeah, his most popular article is The Accents in Downton Abbey. So maybe we'll link to that. The 5 best Irish accents on film and so on. So he's got all this stuff. One that he talks a bit about the schwa, some really interesting stuff about Jamaican patois. That he says, for example, Jamaican patois does not have as many weak vowels. They'll tend to make vowels stronger. I'm not going to dare go there and try to imitate a Jamaican accent.
Yeah, it's probably best not.
Probably best not. But that Jamaican patois, where Americans and Brits use a schwa sound, patois often assigns these syllables an a, e, o, u sound, depending on the context. Anyway, again, I don't want to imitate the accent. But here's one that we could do, a little activity we could do. There was one that he has which is called sorry, I won't even pronounce it. You know, when like the pause word when you're
I like
to say. Yeah. So he says there are kind of 3 ones, and they may depend on different accents. And we have the 3 accents here because there's a British English one, there's a North American one, and then there's an Irish one. And each of these would be represented by in written. But how would you pronounce that word, Sean?
As in, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so he says it could be transported as ERM, but it's like a closer to a central Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd go but or maybe in the old days I'd have probably got a little bit more, depending on my accent.
You're northerner, right? But what about the
I would go that over. I would, but I don't. For me, it would be but
what? And for me, it would be much like a higher sound as in up or strut Not
And Sinead?
What would you do, Sinead, for There's more of an right? Like an
Yeah, it's quite flat, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's more like it's like ma'am,
Yeah. You're starting to sound more Irish by the second, Lindsay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. The difference.
But is that for you? Because I don't know. I mean, it's a Northern English speaker. This brings in the wedge a little bit, doesn't it? The wedge and the schwa are very similar sounds in Northern. Northern.
To our listeners and to me to refresh my memory, what a wedge is.
So your wedge is your umbrella sound.
All right. The upside down, like the arrow pointing up. The wedge.
Exactly. Yeah.
The wedgie sound. Okay. All right. Yeah. No. So that would be the American but that's not what you do, Sean. You do
Depends where I am and who I'm talking to, but yeah.
If you were back home, would you change it? Like
I think it'd be a lot more of a if I'd been surrounded by people speaking in a much heavier Northern accent, yeah, I would probably go And I'll check it out next week.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, this is interesting because I guess we've been talking for a while now. I think we should perhaps swing it round to teaching ideas. I mean, Sinead began by talking about integrating it and how it brings into a lesson, and this activity is actually kind of a bit like that. Something I would do in class, getting the students to make that sound in a quite amusing way. Which with it. So, do you, Sinead? How do you bring it in, Lindsay as well? What kind of exercises do you do in class to highlight the schwa?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you said that because as I was listening to you having this conversation about the and ums, and I was like, this would be a phenomenally interesting thing to do in the classroom, and also something that learners would be, in some ways, a lot more tuned to doing because they tend to hear differences a lot more than we do oftentimes, because the differences sort of clang in their head. They're like, what is that sound that you just made in your accent? So I think that thing of listening to different and ums could be a really interesting thing for students to do.
My mind's also thinking how easy this would be just to capture everybody capturing the sounds on mobile phones and then bringing it back, and so they could all listen to the whole class doing it, doing the ums. I'm going to try that next time I'm in the class. That's great. Easy. I would say, I think to throw one of my favourite activities in the ring, I actually like doing schwas after a listening, and because often you've got the tape scripts, transcripts in the back of I call them tape scripts, that's old, isn't it? The transcripts in the back of a course book that I tend to go and use, and I really like getting the students to listen over and over to kind of highlight the schwa in these
extended speech things.
Yeah, so so after they've done the listening exercise, we then sort of turn it onto it and look at so the students then take their pencil and go through the transcript, trying to mark where the schwas come up in conversation. Because I think since we've got the conversations there in the course book, we should try and use them. But
I think it's dependent on some pretty good audio, because I think a lot of the audio that's produced for course books, I think a lot of that stuff, I've tried to do that with course book audio before, and there's so many schwas missing, and there's so much connected speech
very true
missing,
True. But at the same time, something is better than nothing, and it is a recognition activity is even if it's not wholly great. But you're right that it does depend on. But I think the newer the course book, the more likely you are to have a more natural, shall we say?
Very fair, yeah, very fair. I think that it is definitely, the quality of that stuff is definitely improving.
One thing I like doing is I teach Spanish students, so sometimes I get them to pronounce words. We do kind of drilling of words, so I'm not talking about connected speech here or extended speech. I'm talking about just word level, and I get them to pronounce it. I say, try to pronounce it in the most Spanglish way possible, the strongest Spanish accent you can. And then I say, now try to pronounce it in the most strong, like, English way you can. And they start beginning to to subconsciously putting in the schwa. So they'll sort of like, they'll it down, maybe in parts where they shouldn't, but then focusing in on that. So asking them to like exaggerate what they perceive as their own pronunciation, and then try to make it more English. That's one that I try to do out of word.
Okay, fair enough.
That's nice. That's really nice. I think I think Robin Walker has a nice suggestion for stuff like that, which is getting them to close their eyes and imagine their most English sounding voice. So rehearse it in their brains before they even open their mouths and vocalize, Something that I do a lot with classrooms, with students, is I start every day with a question, every class with a question. And oftentimes I think students are quite tired of that Monday morning, what to do with the weekend question. But yet it is an incredibly high traffic question, but just finding versions of that are lexically more interesting and more varied. So with lower level students, I'll do things like, can you tell us one thing you did yesterday after class? And I'll put it on the board, and then I'll get them to do a noticing task and get them to pull out where those schwas are. Yeah, so get them just to focus on the can you and the you did. Yeah, and then I'll just have them mingle, ask each other. Yeah, and then that question will just kind of change over the week, sort of dependent on what they want to do. Sometimes they've done things like, can you tell us 3 things? So I'll just stop before the number, and they'll decide they want to talk about 3 things. And then I'll just start removing the words. By the end of the week, it's just phonemic script goes on the board, and they're reading it beautifully. And then maybe the following week, it will just be blanks, and I'll just put in the content words. So it'll just be blank, tell us, blank, did yesterday after class. And they'll say it absolutely perfectly. So for me, it's just that rolling in every day. So it's not a big deal. It's just part of what we do every day, No,
it makes sense. That's a nice activity for it. Some good activities there. And of course, we'll put one at the end of the podcast as well, I would presume.
Speaking of which, I think we are coming to the end of the podcast.
I was about to say, we must be getting near the end. We've been talking for ages.
Yeah, but it's been really interesting. Sinead, I'd like to thank you on behalf of TEFL Commute and our listeners for coming and joining us here to talk about the schwa and share your tattoo story, as well as some really cool activities. So thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Sinead.
Pleasure, gents. Pleasure as always.
Obviously, keen listeners will note that you have come off the desert island, because I think we stranded you a couple of seasons ago.
You left me there like 18 months ago, man.
I know, and you're still about. Must move the island further away. So thanks a lot, Sinead.
So that brings us to the end of another episode. Sean, I guess it's time for goodbye.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one. Not that I don't enjoy them all, but bye, Lindsay. I guess I'll see you next one.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
As your commute is coming to an end, here are some ideas you can use when next teaching your students about the schwa. Dictation is an activity that helps highlight the schwa in context to the students. Before class, prepare some sentences for the class. These could be made up or ones from your course material. In class, dictate your sentences at your normal speaking speed. Tell students to write what they hear, even if they don't hear everything. Dictate the sentences, then ask the students to compare together before asking them for the sentences, which you then write on the board. Once the students have given you the correct sentences, ask them to work together to identify which parts are stressed and which parts use the schwa. A variation of this is to dictate the sentences, but rather than getting the students to write what they hear, they're encouraged to count how many words they hear. You can find the instructions for these activities at our website, www.teflcommute.com. You've been listening to the TEFL Commute, an original podcast produced and presented by Lindsay Clanfield, Sean Wilden and James Taylor. Don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing to us on iTunes and by visiting us at www.teflcommute.com.